Before I start, I want to ask one question. Who of you in the audience is a creative, has a creative job, or is a professional problem solver? Can I see hands? Okay, half of them. And how many of you can think about this for a bit, how many of you are ever alone in a place where nobody can reach you, where there's no Wi-Fi, no satellite telephone, nothing? Quite a few. Okay, we'll come back to this at the end of my talk, which is about iconic landscapes as playgrounds for innovation and a nursery for innovation. I have been fascinated by deserts since I was a young child, and so much so that after my studies, I studied biology, and I got a job, very well-paid job, but this desert kept calling. So at a certain time, a long time ago, I quit that job, and with that I gave up all types of securities. I had no plan B, which meant, it had to work or I would fail miserably. And I decided to become a desert explorer. So that was in the pre-TomTom times, which really, you can't imagine. What you see there is all I had to find my way in the desert. And I want to ask you to stand in my shoes for a moment. Imagine you're me, and you have that as your equipment, a pencil, a watch, a map that basically has nothing on it, and a silly compass. And then what you see in front of you is this. This is a desert as big as France, which is about 15 times Holland. And your system is in shock, I can tell you. You stand there with 2 camels and this compass and this map, and nobody there. And it is really like you stare a hungry, roaring tiger in the mouth. And your hair stands up. And your eyes pop, partly because of fear, and partly because they can't be big enough to take in all that beauty, because it is just incredibly wonderful. But you have to find your way there, which causes you to have some nerves. And the blue dots on this map, there are not many of them, a few, they look like this, so that's not very much, and they're very difficult to find. So what happens, although you feel a little helpless in all of that space, you have to find your way. And what happens is that your consciousness expands. You become the desert. As you become your car when you're driving, then your body doesn't stop here, but you are your car. So I became the desert. And a lot of people ask me, but weren't you afraid to die? The point was that was part of the charm, because if you know that when you make a mistake, you die, you are there 200%. Everything inside of you functions. You are alert. You really change. And at night, when I would wake up, look at the stars, there's not just my world is not just a little screen. I'm connected to the universe. And it gives you an incredible sense of being alive. And at the same time, you are in awe for this desert, which is stronger than you are. And that is exactly what I want, actually. Now, the desert very soon taught me 3 very basic lessons, which I want to share with you. One is that a fixed identity doesn't exist. And I don't know how many of you have invested a lot in who you think that you are. All these workshops and, this power talk and pep talk. Well, you go to the desert for a week alone, and you don't know anymore who you are. Because, in fact, you are what other people think about you. And if you have nobody around you to acknowledge that you're funny or that you're a bitch or whatever, then there's nothing left. And actually, what is left is that the desert mirrors who you are. And the desert tells you, you are nothing, you are nobody. And at the same time, you are everything, which I told you before. So it's a bit confusing. And another lesson that I found very important is that I thought the desert was empty, but actually it's filled with dreams, it is filled with potential, and there are moments where you don't know anymore where you are. Are you on Earth? Are you on Mars or the moon? And so it gave me lots of time to think, but at the same time you have your feet on the ground because you have to find your way. And that is a very big gift that the desert gave me. And the third I want to share with you is that, do I really have 4 minutes left only? That's a lot, not much. That thought is a non-linear process. I would toss up an idea in the desert and I would start walking and navigating. And these were not just small thoughts. These were thoughts like, who am I? And why am I here on Earth? So they're quite big. And a month later or a week later, this answer would pop into my mind. So that is what the desert does. Now I'm going a little bit quickly. I wanted to share with you that if you zoom out and you look at the Sahara as a whole, you see a very scary landscape, and it's like as if it is a barrier. But since the introduction of the camel, actually something funny happened. All kinds of trade routes came into existence, and they brought ideas from the north and the south and the east and the west together. And they were often opposite cultures, not opposite languages, different languages, and where they crossed, these trade routes blossomed centers of learning and commerce. So actually, the desert is a place where innovation takes place. And the same is true for Siberia, where I have been traveling for the last 8 years on horse. And historians always thought that the mountain range that you see in this orange rectangular, the Altai-Sayan Mountains, they thought that was a barrier. Actually, since the domestication of the horse, the same happened like in the Sahara, and actually it is a social and cultural hub where lots of ideas come together. So keep this in mind now that I take you to last summer. I went to the place that I just showed you on the map in this rectangular, to a place where nobody lives. It is a kingdom of peat and moss and bog, and you float between heaven and earth, and it's my foot there, my toe, and my horse. And I went to this place to find out what sacred nature is about. Because the people in Siberia believe that nature is sacred, trees and mountains. And as a biologist, I had problems understanding this. And you can understand something with your mind, but I wanted to understand it at gut level. So I thought the only possible way that I can do that is go there alone and stay as long as I need to get an idea of what sacred landscape is about. And I mean, just look at that place. It is, again, a void that is filled with possibilities and potential. And nature spoke to me big time, and only because for one and a half months, I left my logical mind behind, and I told myself I will only try to understand nature with my senses. And it reminded me of Harry Hess, who is a geologist, a very famous one, because he's the one, say, the founding father of the plate tectonics theory. And when he wrote about that in the early 60s, he knew that his colleagues wouldn't believe him, because he couldn't really prove it with data. But he had this vision and this idea. So he called his article an essay in geopoetry. And he hoped, because as you all know with poetry, it leaves a lot of white space for thoughts to float. And he thought, we scientists, we need a mental space where we are allowed to speculate, to dream, to have big visions. And when I went back to civilization from that place where I was for a long, long time, I thought to myself, these places, they look useless to politicians, and they think they can build roads there or put gas pipes lines because it doesn't matter. But actually, these places, I think as humanity, we need these iconic landscapes because they bring to mind that we are not all powerful. I mean, in a city where we are now, in Amsterdam, you see buildings and roads, and it gives us the feeling that we've done all that. We are in charge. We control everything. But we are a bunch of juveniles. We, you know, in terms of evolution, we just arrived. And we have no mom and dad telling us, you don't know what the consequences are of your actions. And I think we need such a mom and dad. And I often have the feeling that I'm surrounded by cyclopses, people with one eye, one-dimensional look, and they all want to go forward and never look backwards. But I think there are so many alternatives, so many ways of being, that we need some landscapes to tell us, hey, you're not all powerful. And so my plea is that we don't tame these last iconic landscapes, but that we honor them, because they are a source of creation, literally also, because the rivers come from there. And now I have a crazy suggestion, which I want to throw at you and see how you react, which is, why don't we give these places the status of sacred landscapes? Because if we only want to protect them by law, then you do this, with your mind. But if we call them sacred landscapes, this is something to do with the gut and with your heart. And then they become entry points for another level of awareness. And you will bow your head and you will revere this place rather than control it. And if you think that I'm a dreamer and a romantic, I think you're right. But on the other hand, I want to give you another last thought, which is that I think we need these big empty spaces because they are this playground for ideas, they are free zones for thought, and they allow us to connect with something bigger than just us, human beings. And so I think we need these places more than they need us. So I want to ask you, the ones of you that sometimes go to places where you're completely alone, that is okay for an individual to go to the forest, to go to the beach. But as humanity, we need much bigger places, like the Sahara, like Siberia. So please, my ideas, even if you don't agree, throw them in the air like I did in the desert with my ideas. Chew on it, do what you have to do, and just see what happens after a month or a week, what answer comes back to you. Thank you very much.